right, guys, joining me now on the show. This is a episode that I've been looking forward to doing for a very long time now, and easily the smartest person that's been on the show.
About that.
I'm setting the bar very high for you, Carlene. But you are a medical professional and you graduated from Harvard. I didn't graduate from Harvard, so I appreciate your time, Carlene MacMillan. Thank you so much for coming on.
For having me.
Are you nervous about that intro?
Big shoes to fill, so I hope I don't disappoint.
So I want to first start because there's a lot that I want to discuss and pick your brain about, and it's mental health and suicide prevention is one that's very uncomfortable for a lot of people, and it doesn't mean that it should be ignored or put to the side. I want you to start us off with tell the people a little bit about yourself and what you do. What is Brooklyn Minds?
So I'm an adult and child psychiatrist. We really at Brooklyn Minds, which is a mental health practice here in the city, we have several locations. We really tend to focus on individuals who've maybe had difficulty getting help elsewhere, oftentimes because they have suicidal thinking frequently, intensely, have severe depression, have things that really when they call around and just want to talk to some random doctor, the doctor says, no thanks, you're not really the right kind of case for us. We really take those people in, we meet them where they're at, and really try to help them. We have a full array of services from traditional psychiatric medication to individual therapy, group therapy, all the way to psychedelic medicine with ketamine and transcranial magnetic stimulation for depression, OCD. So kind of whole range in the outpatient setting.
Now, why is it that some doctors or medical professionals shy away from someone who comes to them with such issues?
Right? Because it's not like a cardiologist would say, oh, you have too much heart problems for me. I only like the sort of minor heart problems, right? But I think in psychiatry and mental health, and it's a little different. A lot of people are in solo practice. I think over 60% of psychiatrists are in solo practice. They're not really equipped. They don't have a team. So if that person is in crisis, after hours, crises don't obey a 9 to 5 schedule. Oftentimes that's too hard for an individual person. So we have more of a team-based approach where, like right now I'm talking to you, if one of my patients is having a crisis, I know there's someone on my team that has my back and that's just so crucial in taking care of this population. I mean, I think the other thing is just, particularly in the United States, it's a litigious place, medical legally fraught, and people are, fearful of malpractice lawsuits. It's, common cause of them is completed suicide for psychiatrists. So they shy away from it.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I like what you said about the, cardiologist just saying, yeah, you know what, you have it's too big of a problem for me to take on. But as someone who I've been pretty outspoken and I've sort of gotten comfortable talking about the mental health issues that I had. And it was a combination of a lot of things, right? I was 27 years old and I kind of was at a place in my life where I was being pulled in many different directions. Carlene, I was going to become a police officer for Nassau County. And yeah, it's not as cool as it turned out. But
Not as glamorous as I hoped.
yeah, and right, and also I just had I was doing the show for about 2.5, 3 years, and the show was picking up a lot of steam. I was with a bunch of other buddies of mine, and we were doing the show, built it from the ground up, and I say that 2018 was the worst year of my life, and I can't even tell you what year number two is. Like I think it's separated itself so much from the pact that it was so overwhelming for me. And to sort of not, I wouldn't say segue, but to ask a question on this topic, what are some of the factors that go into people with mental health issues?
What sort of contributes to it? Like what kind of causes it or causes someone to be kind of in a crisis?
Yeah, as far as just to elaborate a little bit more on the whole cop thing. I had gotten a speeding ticket when in 2016. I did the test and I scored fairly well on it, and I met with the investigator, the whole process, and a bunch of paperwork going on back and forth. And this was a very long process for me. As far as I took the written exam in 2012, I didn't hear back from them until about 2016. It's funny, I had really ballooned up to about 245, 250 pounds. Now I'm about 195, just to put it in perspective. And I was very, very out of shape, Carlene. And I was an athlete growing up. You know, I was one of those dudes who, when I came back from college or some of my high school friends would see me years down the line, they're like, dude, you've gotten fat. Like, what's going on with you? And I was very, very out of shape. And I had to get a physical done. I had to take a physical for Nassau County, a bunch of push-ups, bunch of sit-ups, running a mile and a half run. So it jump started me into getting into shape because I was saying, dude, there's no way that I can pass this exam. It's just not possible. I'm just not physically capable of doing it. So just to skip through some of the parts, I end up getting a speeding ticket, did a 70 and a 50, and I had saved about 50, $60,000 of my own money, which it's hard to save money, right?
Totally, yes.
So that's something we all can agree on.
Okay.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to be living at home until recently. So my father and I, we have a coffee truck in the city, 49th and Park Avenue. We've been there my father's been there for about 28 years now. And, you know, at the time I had stopped going to school. I just was lost. And the one thing I really wanted to do was this show and the podcast. So it got to a point where I have all this money saved up, and I went and I got my teeth fixed. I got braces finally. You know, Carlene, I was 26 years old and I had braces on, and it was very uncomfortable for me. You know, being let's be honest, being a dude, you're 26, you go out to a bar, you try to hit on chicks, and it's just uncomfortable for you.
It would be uncomfortable for a woman too. Yeah, it's just not really the trendiest looking town for sure.
Right. So I go and I put the braces on, and then I end up getting this letter that I got disqualified from the police. And then when I get disqualified from the police, my uncle's an MTA cop in Manhattan, and he's like, dude, you should get a lawyer and fight it. And then before you know it, anytime lawyers get involved, retainer fees and all that, it's
Bye bye $60,000.
a good chunk of it went. So as that's happening, the money that I had saved up, my fallback plan was going to be a food truck, expanding the family business until the podcast and the show really takes off to the point where my side hustle could become my main thing. And then, you know, it just got to a point where there was so much pressure and I was so overwhelmed with everything that my only escape was my show, you know, doing a show twice a week. And then because of the demons that I was battling and some of the issues that I had, it sort of put a hole in my relationship with my buddies that I did the show with. And it got to a point where, you know, I've never shared this with anyone, but they wanted to get rid of me off the show.
Hey, write you off.
Right. And you know what? I wouldn't have wanted to hang out with me and be friends with me in 2018. And one of the reasons, Carlene, why I'm so open about all the things that I go through is because I was a liar and I lied to a lot of people that meant a lot to me. And it was because I had all these other things I was going through. And, you know, my father had gotten a little sick also. Our business had went down to the point where, you know, we were ready to lose our house, and there was a construction going on at our job. So we had to move our location. So you're talking about like 70% of our business went down. So it was tough. So that's another reason why all of a sudden $50,000-$60,000 is
Bye bye. Yep.
vanishes. And it was just a combination of a lot of things. And I went into some really dark places, and it was being pulled in so many different directions. And my one escape was my show, and then that was going to be taken away from me too. So I just wanted to give you a little background on myself and what I meant by that initial question, which I'll bring up again about what kind of factors on the outside go into someone developing these mental health issues?
So yeah, no, I think that Nick, that your experience actually illustrates a lot of the factors. So particularly when people become very depressed to the point where they may even be suicidal, we think of kind of two main factors. There's thwarted belongingness, so people who feel like they don't belong, and perceived burdensomeness. And that those two things, a lot can lead to people feeling that way. So people feel like they just don't have a place in the world. They don't have a direction. They're not quite sure who they are, or who they matter to. Combined with sometimes like, not having money, not being self-sufficient, maybe other people needing to, do stuff for a person, that can really lead people into a very kind of dark hole and this sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy where then you become sort of more burdensome to your friends because you're kind of putting out that energy, right? And so it becomes at the end, you feel like I don't belong anywhere and I'm just a burden. And then, think people can make, really like, terrible choices at that point. So I think that your experience sounds like that. But the redeeming thing here is your show, right? And I think you told me when you're gonna have me on, like these guys are like your audience, like your family, like you really feel close to them. You feel a sense of connection. And that's so important. That's so redeeming for people. We have all the Zoloft in the world and everything. Zoloft is great, Prozac is great, but they're not really a substitute for that feeling connected, feeling like you have a purpose, feeling like people are relying on you. Those things all protect and help people get kind of on out of that dark place. We also know that genetics play a role, right? So family history plays a role. I don't know in your family if you've had other people struggling with kind of similar demons, but commonly that can contribute. And other life circumstances, obviously with COVID, all the uncertainty. So I think is a good point. Like people can get used to anything if they kind of know what to expect. But if there's massive amounts of uncertainty, like we faced in the past year with COVID, it becomes really hard for people to tolerate that. And they become very insecure feeling and can get quite anxious, quite depressed, and really kind of disconnected. So it can be kind of a perfect storm of things.
Yeah, you said something about the sense of family with the audience and the escape, and it's I'm very honest with my audience, Carlene, and I know on the surface it might seem as if everyone says that they're real or authentic, and it's one of those things where you need to get to know me to understand why I mean that and why people that know is like they'll say that that's true because even with you, for example, I'm not gonna lie to you, I was kind of intimidated talking to someone like you, just because like I like to tell people like I'm not really that smart. I just work harder than anyone that I know.
That's a very important type of.
So even my buddy Dom, who usually he would be in here now if we were editing, and he's the camera guy, and I just told him, I was like, man, like this is a uncomfortable topic for many people, and I'm kind of nervous about it. I'm going out of my comfort zone here, and I was like, she's super duper qualified for this conversation, and then I was like, there's me, and he said, dude, you gotta remember that this is your field also, like the whole podcasting thing. You've done so many, and we don't know. Have you done podcasts in the past?
I have, but I have to say I've never done a sports oriented one. So when you first reached out to me, I was like, I don't know anything about sports. I don't know if I'm going to be able to contribute, right? So I think, even though I might seem like an expert in my domain, I feel nervous about coming into your house, right? I mean, that's I think pretty typical. So
Yeah, good. So I do feel a little bit better there about talking about that. But you mentioned something in passing about COVID, and that was a topic I definitely wanted to talk about because, one of the reasons why I have you on, Carlene, is I lost someone very, very important to me, Sergio de Silva, 34 years old. He's been on my show many, many times, and he was a former fighter of mixed martial arts, black belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and we got very, very close over the last 18 months. We had some mutual friends, and we sort of were I guess you could say internet friends, where we followed each other on social media and we would reply to one another, and
A
he,
little back and forth.
yeah, fun trolling and all that, and then eventually I got him on my show, and then we sort of built this relationship and connection, and this dude always would tell me, yo, you got to come and do jujitsu. You got to come and do jujitsu. And I've always been a very disciplined person. I guess it's from being a athlete growing up, and I love to be coached. I'm very open to criticism. I stream every now and then on Twitch, and that audience is a little bit more ride or die, and they get to know you a little bit different because it's a live interaction with them from the chat, and you sort of are able to put name to username and get to know their personalities that way. And they keep me in check, they keep me humbled, and it's a relationship that I really enjoy. So going back to, and why I'm bringing that up is going back to like with my buddy Sergio, with COVID, have you and your team and Brooklyn Minds, have you seen I don't even want to call it momentum because it feels weird, but has there been an influx of just cases coming in because of COVID? Because I don't know if that played a role into what happened, but just from myself, from experience, my business now in the city is down 70%. And I see the toll that it takes on my family. So how has COVID, it's been about 10 months now where the pandemic has really been just so overwhelming. How has that transitioned?
I mean, so I think there's a study came out based in statistics in June, and I think 40% of Americans endorsed, significant kind of mental health concerns during COVID, and when 1 in 10 endorsed even feeling suicidal. So it's super common in our practice. We brought on more therapists and psychiatrists during the pandemic. People to work via telehealth just because the demand was so great. And, we had an existing cohort of patients, existing people who have bipolar or depression, kind of longstanding. But we definitely have had an influx of people who are coming to therapy sometimes for the first time, people that are, thinking they could handle it, and then it just kind of got too much. And so a lot of the people coming in, the complaints have to do with COVID and people's lives just being totally altered. A lot of people, they had jobs where they traveled and they loved that. And, maybe they're married, and when they're not traveling, like their marriage starts to look a lot different. Like the disruption in the force is very strong for people. And I think we also find as mental health professionals, like normally we would recommend a lot of things like that are really connected and social and going out and experiencing the world and experiencing novelty. And this has really been curtailed. I mean, people have gotten very creative on Zoom, but it's really not the same as connecting in real life. So it's been really hard. There's been more usage of medications during this time. So antidepressant, anti-anxiety meds, and insomnia meds. Not just in our practice, but all around the country, and I imagine all around the world. Where before I might not rely on one of those medications for a patient. Now I'm going to say, you know what? Well, let's do what we can. Let's work with what we have, and if now that's a medication, then we're going to use it.
Yeah, you're so right about the social aspect that has been taken away from us, because I remember in August, my friends and we've been doing a fantasy football league for about 8 years. And we were going to do our draft over the computer. And we always, we get the whole board and we all have a little party, sort of. We have some beers, we get some pizza. And when we all linked up, that was probably the first time that all of us were together. And I remember just like high-fiving my friends and hugging them. And then my one buddy was like, dude, you're being mad weird. And I was like, bro, I haven't seen you in 6 months. Like, this is awesome. So you're right. I feel as if that's the social aspect. And again, going back to why the show means so much to me, is it's a form of escapism, right? For as much as some people don't like their job and, oh my God, I can't believe my boss sucks or whatever it might be. Well, it's an escape from you, from leaving from home and being able to just clear your mind for a couple of hours. So is there, so you said 40% back in June, right? That's been, You also mentioned about medication and when you go and see a therapist. One thing that also was tough for me was when I told my parents that I wanted to go see someone. This was at the time when I was being investigated to be a police officer. My so it was I was in a very very bad place, and I turned to my mom and I told her, "Hey, I want to go see someone." And her response was, "I hear you. I want you to, but what happens if the police see this? Maybe you're not qualified for the job." I told my father the same thing. He's a 54-year-old off the boat Greek dude, machismo, and just the macho aspect of it, old school mentality. Where when I told him that I felt depressed, he told me I've been depressed for 54 years. So it's a definitely a different point of view. So I didn't know who to turn to and what to do, and I called my buddy Mustafa, who's also been on the show, and he's a mental health coach, and he's a entrepreneur as well, and has worked with some athletes on helping them out as well. And it was something where I called him and I said, "Dude, I need to speak to you." And he dropped everything. We met up, and he sort of just assessed it as, you just have a lot of life going on at one point, and it that's why it felt so overwhelming for me. Yeah, it's like you're about to make a career decision. You're ruining relationships with people that have been so close to you for a decade plus, and you can't go to your parents to talk about things, and you're wasting all this money on something which, Carlene, in the end of the day, I didn't even want to do the cop thing because they gave me an ultimatum that full disclosure, I'm not going to be a cop anyway, so that's why, like, this isn't going to be held against me. But I I didn't want to do it anyway, so it was devastating to have to go and dump all this money on something I didn't want to do.
Kind of being forced, the momentum of that path kind of takes on a life of its own.
Right, and they told me that if I was to become a cop, then I can't do the show. You can't be on the internet, all these other restrictions and whatnot. So it just got to a point where it was so overwhelming, and I never got to go see a therapist, but it was weird how things started happening for me where a buddy of mine, Steve, just called me one day, and he didn't know what I was going through. And he was just like, "Dude, you want to go out and grab some drinks?" And Carlene, I don't know if I would be here if it wasn't for just that random act from both Steve and my buddy Mustafa. So it's just like the those moments are so, it's as if there's like a higher power, sort of just like that energy and the laws of attraction, right? Like I like The Secret. I like books like that. And is that something that you've noticed too from people that you spoke to?
I think when people sort of open themselves up to those invitations, right? So we'll tell people, like, if you're feeling down and your friend texts you to go somewhere, go. Like, even if you don't feel like it, kind of do the opposite of how you're feeling, because that, nobody's really going to start to feel better by just sitting in bed all day watching TV. Like, that's really not a solution. So if somebody comes into your life who shows an interest and wants to connect with you, and, they're a decent person, then to take advantage of that. So you have to really kind of look for those moments, I think, and look for those people that you feel that kind of resonance with, to connect, for sure. And sometimes it's a therapist and sometimes it's not. It can be a coach, can be, teacher, can be a minister, whoever it is. Like, if you feel that they see you and they care and they want to understand you more, then, you have each other's backs. That goes a very long way, I would say.
The idea of consulting your parents or loved ones, can it be taken as something that's maybe too much of a burden for them to have to deal with?
I think you have to choose wisely. One of the things we find a lot is the saying, "Don't go to the hardware store for a glass of milk," right? I think it's from AA kind of trait stuff, but like, if you always go to your mom and she really is never able to comfort you in the way that you want, and she's just sort of always saying, "Oh, just pick it up by the bootstraps, just kind of be strong," or whatever it is that she does, if it doesn't really work for you, that's not going to be a person that you should go to when you're in crisis. And I think too often people spend a lot of energy wanting certain people in their life to be that person for them, and to somehow, the 100th time they're going to respond differently when I'm feeling down. And they really don't. Most of them don't. It's going to be really hard to change how they respond. So when you find someone that doesn't respond that way, and instead is like, I see you, I hear you, I'm glad we're talking, that's the person that you want to have on speed dial when you're in the crisis. And sometimes when we're doing kind of crisis planning for people, we're saying like, okay, who are the numbers in your phone that you want to call, but also who are the numbers that you don't want to call, that you're going to inevitably feel worse? Because water seeks its own level. People will continually go back and get these like really invalidating reactions from family members who just don't get it.
Is it okay if someone doesn't want to consult you that's close to you like that? In the sense of, I have a buddy of mine who just has openly told me, he's like, dude, I don't want your problems. I don't want you to come to me with your problems. He's like, if you want to go grab a beer and we could shoot some pool and hang out, that's cool. But he has already put that in me, and I respect that. Is that a bad thing on my part to go to him with that, or is it bad on that person saying, hey man, I'm here for you, but I don't want to hear your problems because I don't want to take on that burden?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's good if somebody kind of sets that boundary. Like if they're really not able to be that person for you, I do give that person actually some props for saying that, rather than sort of faking it or secretly resenting it. I think that you just have to figure, okay, that's not a person in my life I'm going to have that level of intimacy with. That's not a person that I'm going to connect with. Maybe we're going to have a couple beers and, hang out, go to a show, whatever, but I'm not going to be confiding in this person. And that's fine. That's just one type of acquaintance. And I think you'll find that the people that are there for you, those are going to be your deeper connections. And those are the ones that you're going to want to really nourish. Because some people are just not well suited to it, or some people, they have their own stuff, right? Sometimes it's not that they're not caring. It's like, maybe they had, a sibling that was really mentally ill, and kind of, they don't want to go and talk to you about that. It reminds them. Or even like myself, like I'm a psychiatrist. I don't want my friendships to be all people that just want me to be their therapist. Like that's not what I'm looking for in those friendships. I don't think that makes me like a bad person. It's just like, that's not what I want out of those relationships. I don't feel that's my role. So you have to kind of look at each person and kind of figure out.
It's I love that you said that about how you have your friends and you don't want to be a therapist for them, because I literally just had this conversation the other day because my buddy Impy, he came over, and he's probably my best friend, Impy, and he came over and we watched football, and I told him, dude, this is the first time that he used to be on the show back in the day, and then he just got like a job promotion. He's like, dude, I would love to do it, but my schedule just doesn't align for it. And he's been on the show pretty much anytime I need him, he comes on the show. But it's amazing that you said that, because our relationship was starting to become, hey man, you want to come on the show? You want to come on the show? Dude, I want to come on the show. And we both looked at each other and said, dude, this is the first time that we hung out and it wasn't about the show.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's important to figure out what you want in certain relationships. And now, like if I have friends that are going through something, they generally kind of know, and they'll come to me and say that they're having a thing, and do I know somebody that could help them? Do they respect that boundary? They see me more as a resource to get them connected to where they want to go, versus having me be their therapist. Just not the role that we play. And so it sounds like for you, this friend was just, that's not the role that he's going to play for you, and that's fine.
There was something you mentioned before in passing, and I was telling you this before we started recording, how I have notes in front of me, and anyone that knows me knows that I never have notes. It's not something that through trial and error, right? When I first started doing a podcast, no journalism degree, no communications degree, no broadcasting, none of that. I would prepare questions for, all right, I got 5 questions for Carlene. I'm going to ask her. Well, Carlene just spoke for 4.5 minutes, and I've completely just checked her out because I'm so worried about getting to question 4 and 5. So it got to a point where I kind of just like feel, right? Again, energy seems to be a big buzzword over the last couple of years, and a lot of momentum for it. But you mentioned something about having family members from, your past maybe having suicidal thoughts or mental health stuff. I haven't. I haven't. I've also, one reason, Carlene, why this has hit me so hard is people throw the word blessed around a lot, but I can truly say I've been blessed in the sense where I'll be 30 in March. I've never suffered any loss of any kind. My grandma, when she was 79, lived in Greece. I was 13, maybe, but also
Remote though. Yeah.
pretty remote. I wasn't old enough to understand it. I met her twice. It was something where this was the first one where I was like, damn. So I didn't know how to cope with it at all. And how is it, what are some of the emotions that are like standard emotions to feel when something like this happens?
I mean, I think it's important to realize that there isn't like standard emotions, that there are people, everyone will kind of handle a loss like this differently. And for some people, you know, when they experience someone in their life dying by suicide, it might not hit them for a while, right? They may be sort of numb to it. Other people could be deeply impacted, you know, straight away. But it can be really, really shake people up. People can become depressed, anxious, guilty, all different kinds of emotions can happen.
What about angry? Is that a normal one? Because I felt a little angry too. And I just, again, I remember just asking some people like, dude, I feel some anger. Is that something that's part of?
I mean, so we talk about like primary and secondary emotions. So oftentimes anger is what we call a secondary emotion. I mean, it's like the surface kind of feeling. It's what you get sort of straight away. It motivates you to take action. It's adaptive, right? To feel angry about something. But underneath that, sometimes, usually the primary emotion tends to be sadness, or anxiety, and that the anger is just kind of what's come to the table. But it's usually like the tip of the iceberg. But absolutely, I mean, it depends on the circumstances. And I mean, I think with, whenever there's a suicide, there's very common to be anger or look to blame somebody or something, or, look for some sort of answer. It's super common, or to be angry at yourself or angry at the person, right? How could they do this and cause this for their whole world or their family? Like all of those feelings are completely normal and typical to have, because it's a very traumatic action that, unfortunately for some people ends up happening.
Yeah, yeah, because I just didn't. There was everything you mentioned is what I felt. It's been just a whirlwind of different emotions, different roller coasters, and the way I found out was a buddy of mine called me and he told me, and I was like, what? No way. I was like, dude, I spoke to him the night before. I was with him a couple days before. We had just trained. And at first, Carlene, I don't know how to say this without really getting in trouble, but, accidents happen, right? In the sense where at first it was said that it might be like heart failure, right? Something like that. And you know what, man, in the end of the day, like things happen and I could live with that, right? And then the way I found out was I'm on Twitter, and one of my really close friends, his younger brother, he went on this like long thread on Twitter about mental health and suicide and whatnot. And I mean, luckily I had just finished eating right before I got that phone call, because then I didn't eat for 3 days. I was eating saltine crackers and just drinking water. And then I messaged my buddy's brother and I was like, hey man, what are your tweets about? Are you okay? And Carlene, how long, when you get the dots, when someone is texting you back, how long it took? Floodgates. It was because we knew him also. And then that's sort of how I found out. So it was, for me, that was where all the emotions started going through. And then, because you always hear, and correct me if I'm wrong, you hear commonly, oh, you never saw this coming. We didn't think this was happening. And then I start playing investigator. I'm going through old tweets. I'm going through old posts. Is it something that people sort of uh, cover up in the sense of, some of his tweets are, I can't believe this dude is fighting this dude. And then the next one is sort of dark, but hindsight's 2020.
It actually varies. For I think it's very, very common to become this detective and try to find the clue or the missing piece that if only this happened, then they would still be with us or whatever. But people can want to be dead and be alive at the same time. They can be planning a wedding and then the next day complete suicide. It's oftentimes an impulsive act. It's not a premeditated act. It can be, of course, but for many people, 10 minutes before they did it is when it came to them. And usually there's like a maelstrom of things coming together that made that happen for them. Oftentimes substance use is involved, drugs, alcohol, or some kind of serious loss, somebody losing their job, some piece of their identity, their wife leaving them, big things like that. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes you're left like scratching your head being like, I thought this person's life was pretty okay. They seemed fine. And those are, I think, the hardest ones where we just kind of never know what's going on, going on in their inside for them or how long it was.
Is there a proper protocol to be able to ultimately we all want to prevent things like this from happening, right? So how do you try to identify it before it's too late?
And I think that people who are having a mental illness that's leading them to die by suicide, like a depression, generally there's going to be some signs of that among people that are close to them. They're going to notice some changes. Maybe the voice is a little softer or slower. Maybe they're losing weight and they're not meaning to. Maybe they're gaining weight and they're not meaning to, right? There's some sort of change. They're coming in late to work. They're going to bed more early. They're not coming to, the poker game anymore. Like there are sort of signs somebody's sort of kind of withdrawing or having some kind of shifting. I think rather than, just say, oh, they're probably fine. Like just be curious and you don't have to say, hey, are you depressed? You say like, oh, hey man, I noticed like, I'm missing you at the games. What's going on? Like, well, you okay? What's up? Just going to be curious and open. And that could be an opening for them to say more. And if they say no, you can say, look, I'm always here if there's something that you want to chat about, just kind of leaving yourself open that person could reach out to you. And then I think if they do reach out and it's, obviously, going to be a serious situation, you want to help them get help really quickly. You don't want to be on, suicide watch with them. You don't want to feel like you need to save them. Like you just want to get them to a professional, quickly when it becomes clear it's a real significant mental illness situation.
I just finished reading this book, The Coddling of the American Mind. Have you ever heard of it?
I haven't heard of that. No.
Oh my God. You need to, because you gave me your time, I'm going to send you a copy.
That'd be amazing. I like the title.
It's by Jonathan Haidt. He's a NYU professor, and the title really explains a lot about what the book is about, right? The coddling of the American mind, how good intentions led to a failed generation. And one of the big talking points is that there was a national rise in adolescent anxiety and depression during the social media boom, right? 2008-ish, Facebook really takes off. 2010, Instagram launches. Snapchat, 2011. Twitter was around from like '06, but Twitter didn't really get going until a little bit further on. Is there any correlation between social media and mental health issues?
Yes. So there's kind of a growing body of evidence that the answer is, I think, yes. And I don't know if you saw that movie recently, The Social Dilemma, where they talked quite a bit about how the social engineering and everything. And so, yes, I mean, I think that it's become a lot easier, particularly for teenagers, for bullying, for people to be, trolled in various ways. And for people, I think, importantly, people put a curated experience out Facebook. I know plenty of people who they have a beautiful Facebook, beautiful Instagram, all kinds of happy pictures, apple pies they're baking, the whole 9 yards. And I know that behind the scenes they're miserable, but nobody's really putting that. I mean, there's a few people where that's sort of their jam and that's what they're putting out there, but a lot of people are really doing this curated look at my, when it was pre-COVID, my vacation, or, look at this exciting thing, or I got a new job, right? People don't necessarily post, hey guys, guess what? I lost my job today. Some do,
Right.
but a lot don't. A lot really want to manage their image in a way that in day-to-day life off social media, it's a lot harder to do. I don't think all social media is created equal in that way. And actually, there's a new platform. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called Clubhouse. Have you heard of this at all?
That's ironically enough, that's how I found you.
Okay, on Clubhouse.
Yeah, yeah. I was looking up mental health folks in New York City, and I saw you. And I don't know, I just got the vibe that like you would be someone that would be easily approachable. And as we're about 50 minutes into the show, it seems to be the case.
Yeah. Well, so Clubhouse is social media. I think for your audience that doesn't know, it's an audio only social media platform where it's really just conversations. It doesn't really matter what you look like in real life. You just have a little picture, and it's like voice and something very intimate about voice, right? Probably like as a podcaster, like, yeah, video is cool, but there's something about listening. And I actually find that platform, it's not yet been studied yet. It's quite new, and it's, gradually opening to more people over time. It's kind of exploding. That platform, I think overall is probably more healing for people. I feel a lot of people on there feeling like they're actually genuinely connecting with people, making real relationships, particularly in the time of COVID, that, they weren't on Twitter. And some of the people I meet on there, I follow them on Twitter. We interact on Twitter a little bit too. It's very different than like being in a room with them. And then I see them coming in another room on Clubhouse, and it's like, oh, that's this person. I know them. They're great. And let's do a thing together. So I think I don't want to get into this sort of all social media is bad, but I think a lot of the really performative social media is bad. The sort of Instagram, I don't want to say TikTok is bad, but there really is this performative nature of it, and a lot of people, that's really not a great place for them, particularly if they're feeling, depressed. If you're feeling really depressed, you're not going to do like a TikTok dance. It's just not going to happen. And, then you're not going to go viral, right? I mean, that's just the world that we're living in now. And I think that's hard on people.
Yeah, one of the things that the coddling of the American mind really dissects is the difference between girls and boys when it comes to their relationships with social media. And you mentioned like the cyberbullying, right? Like, it's weird. I feel as if, right, everyone thinks their generation is better than all the other generations. Like, I'm sure you think your generation is better than mine. I think mine is better than theirs now. But, I'm a millennial, right? And it's one of those things where I kind of had a childhood growing up, right? Like, I was able to, my friends and I, we would come home from school and we'd go straight to the park to hoop and play football. And we came up at the start of the MySpace and social media era, but we would go to my buddy Frankie's summer house in Connecticut, and we literally wouldn't have I would text my mom that I got there Friday, and I would put my phone away. And why do I need my phone there? Because my friends are there, we're barbecuing, we're drinking, we're fishing, whatever dumb young kid stuff we're doing.
Living life,
right? So we didn't have our phones for that. But also, I don't want to shit on social media because we're talking because of social media. I've built this pretty cool, like you were gonna come into the studio. I have a studio like over here, and I'm able to make these connections, and I'm getting money for my passion and my project with no proper credentials, right? Like, so I don't want to shit on social media because it's birthed everything that I'm doing. And when I watched The Social Dilemma, it was that was my reaction. Like, obviously,
mine too.
yeah, we're all on our phones. I don't think it's a bad thing. I enjoy being on my phone. Can I cut back on it? Yeah, I've tried to. Now I'm under about 4 hours a day. I was up to 8, it was Yeah, yeah, but also it's a weird dynamic because my business is social media. I have to promote. I have to be on there. Like, oh, you know what? That I don't do TikTok dances, but that's something that's maybe I should. You never know. Might bust a move. That might be my big break. But you sort of observe and you see what works and what's catching on, right? Like a couple of years ago, there was a big shift in you need to have captions on your Instagram videos, and the logic behind that was, Carlene, you and your team, you're having a meeting, and you probably wouldn't do this because you're a professional, but say you're on Instagram and you're not going to have the sound on, but if you watch the video and it has captions, you at least are following what's going on. So that's why like captions have really boomed. But going back to like the difference between girls and boys, is there a difference between how a woman feels about anxiety and depression and how a guy does? Because you know there's when I got really fat, my friends would violate me and make fun of me for being fat. I didn't want to cancel them. I didn't want to get mad at them. It was like, man, I should maybe get in shape. And I did.
Right. It's a different way of interacting than girls.
Yeah. And then and I have a friend of mine who's a beautiful young lady. She's a lawyer, right? And someone told her that she needed to lose weight and she became like anorexic. And it's like, dude, you look amazing. Like what, so whereas when my friends tell me I've gotten fat, it's motivation for me. So like, is there any differences between how a guy and a girl deal with anxiety and depression?
Yeah, I mean, there are some generalities. There's obviously exceptions, but I think that for girls growing up, the emphasis on image for many of them is quite strong, right? The emphasis on how they look and how they're going to be judged for how they look is stronger than it is for guys. Guys are more judged by, are they good at a sport? Are they smart? What do they do? Right? Whereas the woman, what she does is generally not kind of what's being led with, or even like, I can remember in school, I was like, smart, and I felt like embarrassed to be smart. And, I ended up having to switch high schools because I felt like kind of a fish out of water in my school. And I went to a school where I could feel like that it was cool to be smart, and it was cool to want to be like learning things and doing well on a test. Whereas like, in another environment, it was sort of like, no, you should be like a pretty girl. You should be like a cheerleader, and your smarts are sort of a liability. They're not really an asset. They're detracting from, your femaleness. And I think the world's changing and getting better, but it's still there. I mean, if you look on Instagram and stuff, it's still there. What women are posting, what they're expected to post is different than what guys are posting, for sure.
Yeah, there's something also from the book that they talk about. Girls suffer more than boys because they're more adversely affected by social comparisons. Digitally enhanced beauty, harder to escape with social. And that was one thing that my mom works at a school, and she had told me how even with myself, right? Like when I was in high school, I mean, I didn't get bullied. And also I found out that I had just forgot, right? Like when I was in high school, I went to my high school reunion, and Carlene, I was so happy to hear that like I wasn't a bully. I just didn't remember. I was like, I don't think I was an asshole to people. Like I never have I hurt people in the past? Probably. Maybe I've said some dumb shit to them, but my intentions are never to like be hurtful to someone. So I just didn't know, and I was such a relief. I was telling my buddy Mustafa, I was like, "Yo, I'm happy I wasn't an asshole to people like growing up." You know what I mean? Like it was such a relief for me, but it was the enhancement and the escaping you can't with social media, right? So like my mom told me, if you were bullied in high school back in the day, at least you could go home and escape for a couple hours, and then you could say to yourself, all right, once it's 2:30 or 3 o'clock, whatever time you finish school, I could at least escape the bullying or any issues that I had to deal with. But now you never escape it.
Yeah, no, I mean, you can't escape it. It doesn't go away. It's hard to delete it. And I think it also means that if you were an asshole in high school or something, and someone could make some posts about how much of an asshole you are and all this kinds of stuff, and could damage your reputation, right? That whole cancel culture thing is heightened. I think it's around quite a bit in the past few years because it's so easy to share information, including misinformation, on social media, unfortunately. And that's very, can be very damaging to people.
As we start to wind down a little bit, once again, thank you for your time and I appreciate it. I have just some numbers here that were rather alarming to me when I saw them. It was from the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention. Suicide is the 10th leading cause of death. In 2018, 48,344 people passed away to suicide. 1.4 million attempted it. Comes out to 132 people daily. Carlene, I never really plan on saying things on a podcast at a certain time, but just to add context and perspective, we're about an hour in. That means 5 people have done that.
It's remarkable. And you know what is also remarkable is that despite advances in health and all of the suicide awareness and stuff, the suicide rate is not going down. We're not making a lot of traction in it. It is a vicious thing, vicious illness that, as much as we want to try and do things, unfortunately, it's still happening. And I think we always want to try to do better, but it's pretty alarming for sure.
The last thing I want to end with in closing is is this considered a selfish act?
So I don't think so. I think that it's very normal to feel like that about someone who does that. But you have to remember that I think the selfish person, it's not really a person, but the illness is selfish. The illness is all consuming. It's the one that's kind of taking over and leading someone to this, whether it's, alcohol use, whether it's depression, whatever it is, that's pulling that person away. And the person that you cared about is sort of under the influence of the mental illness. So very, very rarely would it be a selfish act. And most of the time, to get back to what we talked about in terms of thwarted belongingness and perceived burdensomeness, most of the time the individual feels as though they are a burden and that it would be better off without them. I can't tell you how many people who, we obviously have people who care about them, somehow in their mind, due to this illness, get it in their head that no, their family would be better. Or I'll even have patients who say, "Oh, you'll get over it. You just have a lot of patience. You'll be fine." And that's not true. You don't really ever get over this. It changes you, right? It becomes less painful over time, but it's a very damaging thing. It has many ripple effects. In families. It's quite destructive, but I don't think the person is being selfish. I think they're usually acting in a way that they think is going to actually make the world better, really. And usually that's just so tragic because it's so not true. It's so far from how you see them and how you care about them.
Yeah. You're right. It's a weird thing because I read somewhere that it's an end for them, but the suffering that is left behind for everyone that cared, it's like to the 100th power. And
generational too, right? It passed down. It's like someone in your family died by suicide. That changes a family. That really can impact things for generations to come. And I think people don't know that, or they think that they'll be the exception, and they feel like they don't matter, but they do. They do matter. I've yet to meet a person who doesn't matter in this way.
Yeah, it was the thing that ultimately saved me, Carlene, was I didn't have it in me to do it because I couldn't imagine like my parents seeing me. I'm an only child.
Me too. Yeah.
There you go. I've never shared this before with anyone, but my parents, when they first started dating, my mom got pregnant, and within 2-3 months, and they decided not to keep the kid because my dad said it's the biggest regret of his life, but he said it was 8 weeks into dating. He's like, I didn't know that this is going to be the woman that I'm with for 34 years. And then fast forward a couple of years later, you get the boy right here. And then 2 years after that, my mom had a miscarriage. And my mom, I'm a mama's boy. And even like with my dad, when I stopped going to school and he just told me, he's like, dude, without that piece of paper, you're going to have to figure it out on your own. And he told me like it's going to be hard and it's validation and it's just easier to get things done when you have that piece of paper. You just got to work harder than everyone else when you don't. And they have me like, I get heat sometimes from my friends because they say I'm spoiled, but I also like I work, like I bust my ass a lot, like I've never been on a family vacation with my parents. That's one thing that like I'm working towards. I want to go on a vacation with them. I want to retire them. That's like my main goal with everything. So I could never just imagine like, dude, my parents, what they've been through to see their one kid do this would like just be devastating. So I'm happy that I wasn't able to go through and do that, because I started thinking about like, I even told a buddy of mine, he's like, bro, you would have altered my whole trajectory moving forward.
Absolutely. I mean, I would rephrase it a little bit and instead
Yes, please tell me.
in you to do it, I would say you had it in you to live. You had it in you to continue on, that you had enough of those loved ones in you. You had enough kind of understanding and kind of hope that, it's, I would sort of put that frame on it, because I don't think it's like people come saying, oh, I'm too weak to kill myself, or I'm a wuss, right? I'm too chicken to do that. And I really stop them and say, no, it's actually braver to live in the face of adversity. It is a will to live that is quite strong. And most people, they have that in them, but it sometimes takes quite a bit to pull it out of them. And it can get really lost when they're in quite a dark space.
Thank you for rephrasing that for me.
I don't know if that helps, to think of like you had this strength in you, and that, part of that is your parents that helped you along in that way and made you feel loved, a little spoiled, but loved, right? And that's important. And I think that those are the type of factors. Oftentimes people will be like, I don't have anyone, but I have a dog, or I have a cat. People during COVID, all the animal adoptions were up, and I was so happy to see that, because honestly, for some people, you know what, that keeps them going. That's the one thing, is that the relationship they have with their pet. And whatever works, whatever makes you kind of put one foot in from the other and live another day, well, I'll take it.
Carlene, you are a beautiful human. I appreciate you so much for coming on. This was an absolute honor. I hope you enjoyed the back and forth as well, and I didn't disappoint in the conversation either.
This was great, I think, and I give props to you also just for doing this topic. And I hope that your listeners feel a little bit more comfortable talking about it and asking questions and getting help, because, like you said at the start, it's not a thing people want to talk about. Tend to bury it away.
Yeah, it's a level of comfort that I have with my audience, and they know that I don't speak on certain things because I'm just like not informed, or honestly don't like care about it, right? Like we had a very, like when it comes to politics for me, Carlene, I only know that there's a Democratic and Republican Party. I can't tell you anything else. I check out so quickly when that conversation comes up. Is it bad? Is it good? That's just my thing. I just avoid it at all. But when it comes to certain things that I'm really passionate about and I care about, the word influence gets thrown out a lot, and trying to inspire. I never try to. I kind of just tell you how I feel about things with a very authenticity, I should say, behind it. So, again, thank you for coming on. This is the part of the show where the floor is yours. Promote anything that you work on, anything that you do, where they can find you. You mentioned your husband has a podcast. Let's promote that also. Let's get it going.
Yeah, so our practice, again, is Brooklyn Minds. You can go to www.brooklynminds.com or find us on social. We have the full range of outpatient mental health services. We do take some insurances, Cigna, United, some Medicare. And so, if that could be a good fit for you, come to our website. You can submit an inquiry and someone from our team will be in touch. I would encourage folks to do that, particularly if they've never sought mental health services before. And yes, my husband does have a podcast. He's a psychiatrist as well. His podcast is called Remotely Possible. And he focuses on sort of challenges in healthcare, particularly with COVID, and kind of how the field as a whole is changing and facing different sorts of barriers. So if you're interested in that, check it out.